Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
What's up, guys? It's Darren. Welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. A lot of business schools these days are really promoting this idea of experiential learning. And I think the Manchester MBA takes this to a whole new level. You're put into live consulting projects basically from the day you enter the program. They require 900 client-facing consulting hours from all of their students. And this is done over 3 live consulting projects during the MBA program. So the Manchester MBA is really putting their money where their mouth is when they say they practice practice-based learning. You know, Manchester is one of the oldest and most well-regarded universities in the United Kingdom. And if you're interested in studying in the UK, I really encourage you to head to touchmba.com where we can help you figure out which schools fit you best in the UK or elsewhere in Europe. My guest, Chris Healy, who runs marketing and recruiting for the Manchester MBA, also encourages applicants to get in touch with his team directly before they apply to see whether, it's a good fit for them. So if you're interested in the program after listening to this podcast, I encourage you to get in touch with Chris's team. Also, one more note, if you're looking to compare the top business schools in the UK side by side, we've written an in-depth guide that does so. So be sure to check that out. We'll link to that guide to top UK MBA programs in the show notes of this episode, or just Google, Best MBA UK Touch MBA, and you'll be able to find that guide. So I hope that helps you as well. All right, let's get to our chat. I'd like to welcome Chris Healy, who's the head of MBA marketing and recruitment from the Alliance Manchester Business School, the University of Manchester, to the Touch MBA podcast. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Darren. Thank you for having me.
So, Chris, I saw that you have actually been working for Manchester for over 12 years. Could you just tell us a little bit more about what you do for the business school?
Of course, yes. So I've been here just entering my 13th year now at Alliance Manchester Business School, and during that time, I've always worked on our MBA programs. And in terms of what I do is I'm responsible for marketing and recruitment of our 3 MBA programs, which is the Manchester Full-time MBA, our part-time Manchester Global MBA, and we also have a dual MBA with the Kelley School of Business in Indiana in the US. So we do look to recruit some of the best MBA students across the world onto our 3 MBA programs.
Absolutely. And I mean, we're lucky to have you. You have so much experience with the program, and I'm sure you've seen the program evolve in many ways too. But let's first start with, what do you think makes the Manchester MBA unique from all the other top ranked B schools out there?
Yeah, in terms of what makes the Manchester MBA unique, before going into that specific detail, I always think it's very relevant to give a very, very top level introduction to the school and the university. As you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast in your introduction, of course, Alliance Manchester Business School is part of the University of Manchester, which was established in 1824 and is the biggest single site university in the UK. Very, very prestigious university. It has 25 Nobel Prize winners, most recently for the discovery of graphene, which actually we do have now involvement with some of our MBA students, which I can perhaps go into in more detail later. And also with the business school started in 1965, and it was actually one of the first 2 schools to open in the UK alongside London Business School. And that came around because as I'm sure you know, Darren, and many of your listeners will know, because of the growth and quality of graduate schools in the US, the UK government didn't want the UK to be left behind. Therefore, that led to the inception of Alliance Manchester Business School, and then, of course, in London, London Business School. Our MBA is triple accredited. It's ranked as one of the top 5 MBAs in the UK, top 10 in Europe, top 40 in the world. And then in terms of what's unique about the Manchester MBA specifically, well, when you think of all MBA programs, often people will automatically think about, going back to school, which means going back to the classroom. And of course, you will be doing that on all MBA programs. But what we do differently is we get our students outside of the classroom. So we've built our curriculum to, of course, focus on those core business disciplines, things that all MBA programs in the world will look at, things such as strategy, economics, marketing, finance, accounting, operations, etc. They are the fundamentals in business. But what we also do alongside teaching those core business disciplines is we take the students outside of the classroom by having them working on real life consultancy projects. So we've built in a not-for-profit consultancy project, which students undertake at the start of the MBA. Students will then go and do a commercial business consultancy project. That can be with the likes of KPMG, W. Then students would complete the program by doing an international business consultancy project. And that can be with the likes of Cisco, TNT, GSK. And what that means is students on the Manchester MBA will actually receive 900 hours of client-facing time. So that is more than any other MBA program in the world. And it's always, going back to your original question, it's actually one of the things that I will always encourage prospective MBA students to think about. Because yes, of course, the classroom is important, but also the classroom isn't always going to tell you what's unique about a school, what's unique about a specific MBA, what's unique about that structure of that school's MBA. But I would definitely say it's very much focused on our consultancy projects. And to give you to give the listeners an idea of what I mean by that, and to try and bring it a bit more to life, how it works, say on our international business consultancy project, we have a list of clients. We'll have more clients than we'll have students. And what would happen is, in order for you to be considered to be a client for one of our MBA groups to bid for, you'd need to invest in between £15,000 to £20,000. And the students would then look and decide, okay, they need to pick 3 potential clients to bid for, and they will be bidding against their classmates and competing against their classmates. So the students need to be very strategic right at the beginning in terms of how they pick their 3 clients. Do they go for the 3 biggest companies on the client list? For example, I mentioned, say, BMW. We have a long history of working with BMW. But if there's no one in that group who has got experience in manufacturing or automotive industries, are they going to beat the other MBA groups who might have students working from those backgrounds? So there's a number of things to consider even when you're selecting your top 3 to bid for. And it's also interesting how the bidding process works, because you might be bidding for your 3rd choice client on a Monday morning, and your 1st and 2nd choice might not be until Friday. And come Tuesday, the 3rd choice client has been impressed with your bid and your pitch, and they offer you the project. And then the group have got a decision to make. Do they take their 3rd choice or do they try and hold out so they can bid for number 1 and 2? Now, the clients might put a specific deadline that they want to know by Wednesday morning. So they've got that choice to make. If they take it, then great. They no longer have to turn up on Friday to bid or to pitch for number 1 and 2. If they reject it, though, because they're extremely confident of winning project number 1 or 2, and if they do, then that's great. But in the event that they don't win number 1 or 2, they might end up with a client that might have been, who knows, maybe even 15th on their list. So a lot of strategic thinking has to come into how you select and how you go about the bidding process before you even start working on for a specific client. And just to end, to again bring it more into life for the listeners, a typical example could be there has to be an international component to the international business consultancy project. So if I look at someone such as, say, MasterCard, who we've worked with recently, the students were looking at innovative credit card technologies in Western Europe. And they were looking at markets in the UK, Germany, Italy, Austria, and Poland. And that meant the students had to be in those 5 countries at different times. You can see that means, 5 or 6 students in a group, upwards of 30, 40 flights in total, number of nights of hotel accommodation, etc. So you can begin to see how that £15,000 to £20,000 budget that the clients have to have at the start of a consultancy project, how that's being spent. And of course, you will obviously have research costs as well when you're in country. But the one of the reasons why I mention that amount of the £15,000 to £20,000 is to give your listeners an idea. These are not clients that we're working with just because we've got such a wonderful relationship with them. These are clients that we're working because they expect and demand high and the best results from our MBA students. So the pressure really is on our MBAs throughout the MBA to deliver for our clients.
Wow, that's 900 hours of live consulting work. So how much say do the students have in picking their own teams for these 3 consulting projects?
Yeah. So on the Manchester MBA, one of the things that we say to all the students is before you get to the International Business Consultancy Project, which is the final part of our MBA, you will have worked with every individual on our MBA at some point during the program. And so what that means is we are putting the students into groups for the majority of the MBA. But when it comes to the International Business Consultancy Project, that is the time where the students pick their own groups. And we've purposely done this because it means because we're recruiting the best MBA students in the world, we want those to perform like the best MBA students in the world. And your level of performance has to be very high throughout the program, because if you dip, then when it comes to the final stage of that program, you want to be wanted by your fellow MBA students because you're all picking groups together.
Absolutely. And what I find really interesting about how you throw your students into these consulting projects from the very start of the program is, what about those students who don't have a business background, right? I'm curious how you guys blend your core courses that you offer at the beginning. And I'd also be curious to know how many core courses you have, right? And how you help those students that don't have the business background perform in those consulting projects, or are you really just recruiting, students that could be great consultants from the start? So a lot of questions in there.
Yeah, in terms of do we only recruit students with a specific business background, the answer to that is no. So if I look at our class that's just started, and this is just off the top of my head, I know a couple of students who came with a medical background, and they were very fortunate to be awarded very attractive scholarships, and they will have been competing against students with your traditional business backgrounds. Also you see people with, say, perhaps a something like a legal profession, or people with, so that's more the current trend that we're seeing in the markets. But then, of course, historically, the MBA was always developed for those, was originally developed for students who came from an engineering background, who did not have that business commercial discipline already. So we specifically look to recruit a very diverse class. So whether that be people from finance and banking, whether it be engineers, IT professionals, and that's very key for us at Alliance Manchester Business School. And then you also asked about our core courses. One of the interesting things that we've run on our curriculum you heard me mention those core business disciplines a few moments ago, and what we looked at was the synergies between some of these disciplines. So if you think about marketing and operations, two subjects that historically and traditionally will be taught in isolation with each other. But we decided to look at it and go, actually, there's a lot of synergies between these two functions in all organizations. You've always got for example, say the tension of a marketing and sales area of an organization over-promising, and then operations under-delivering. And we look at some of those relationships across the MBA, and we've brought, say, those two courses together to look into those into more detail. The same goes with, say, strategy and economics. Again, two subjects traditionally taught alone. But if you're looking at this, evolving the strategic direction of an organization, you have to be acutely aware of both the macro and micro environment. So we bring these courses together. So that's just something quite different that we've done over the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I was looking at your curriculum, I was like, oh, they only have 5 core courses. But, for example, the name of one of them is, as you just said, operations and marketing, right? So that combination of disciplines. So, okay.
It's interesting. Sorry, Darren, to cross you there, but it's interesting when you say the operations and marketing, because the official name for that is operationalizing and communicating value. But and there was a lot of debate in, will everyone understand what that means from the outset? So then we thought, oh yeah, that's a good point.
That's right. I mean, I always love to see business schools kind of change up the common ways of offering the MBA curriculum. So I found it really interesting. And I also wanted to talk about the fact that your business school has centers all around the world. And I'm wondering how applicants and students to your program can really benefit from you guys having a footprint in places like Singapore, Hong Kong, I believe Sao Paulo as well.
Yeah, so that's right. We are one of the few business schools across the world that have our own specific MBA campuses across the world. They're located in Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Sao Paulo. And they were developed for our executive MBA students because, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have our Manchester Global MBA. And up until then, we started that model in 1992. And it's only in the last, say, 5 or 6 years that we've really began utilizing our global presence for our full-time MBA. So, for example, one of the things that we do now is we allow our full-time MBA students to attend elective courses with our executive MBA students. So, of course, that brings huge potential networking opportunities for our full-time MBAs. For example, if you're thinking of going into the finance and banking industry after you graduate, and you might be looking to doing that in the UK, maybe outside of the UK. And if you were looking at doing it outside of the UK, perhaps somewhere like Hong Kong and Singapore would be two obvious areas to look at. And if you did have that mindset, it would also then therefore make sense for you to take some electives in Hong Kong and Singapore with fellow Manchester MBA students, and you can begin to grow your network in that area. We also have a traditional international exchange program on the Manchester MBA, which of course we're one of a number of top level business schools to have that. But I do think these electives offer something very different. We also do study tours in Shanghai and Dubai. The reason we have them in those two specific markets, of course, two global cities, but also they are our two biggest global campuses as well. So the networks that we have in that area it makes the experience very fulfilling, not just from a personal level to our full-time MBA students, but more importantly from a professional level as well.
Absolutely. And your typical class is about 100 to 120 students for your full-time MBA program?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And okay, and I mean, is there anything else that you'd like, more applicants to know about Manchester's academic offering that maybe, that is misunderstood or less well known?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, in terms of the academic offering, I always look at it like this. When you're considering top level elite schools, then you can always be taught by some of the world's best academics, and the quality of the contents that you're going to receive in that classroom is going to be of the highest possible standards. So if I'm, when I'm thinking about, say, I'll just use my colleagues in the UK, take Oxford Said Business School, Imperial down in London, and Manchester. All three of those schools will offer an excellent academic experience. But of course, an MBA is more than just a pure academic experience. And as I said earlier on during this podcast, our MBA is not just a classroom-based experience. So what I would say to people considering an MBA, if you're an individual who's looking for purely a classroom-based experience, the Manchester MBA is probably not the MBA for that individual. And as much as we might like that individual on our program because they've got an amazing academic background, a very good professional experience, a great GMAT score, etc., it doesn't mean that our program is the right one for everyone. It is a unique program, and it is very much towards those who want that practical way to study as well. And this all comes from what we call our Manchester method. And the Manchester method, put simply, is a practice-based approach to teaching and learning, meaning we want to take people outside the classroom whilst they study for their MBA. So it is something worth considering for, I think the classroom, outside the classroom conundrum is something worth considering for all MBA candidates.
And what do you have to say to applicants interested in Manchester, but, a bit concerned about Brexit and I don't know how that might impact their future careers? I'm sure you get a lot of these questions as well. Like, I'd love to hear just more about that, and as well as just Manchester and living and studying there as well.
Yeah. in terms of the big Brexit question that we do here often, it's something that's not really affected. It's not something that's really affected us at Alliance Manchester Business School. I think there's a few reasons for that. The UK, for probably just a bit less than the last 10 years or so, the immigration rules changed in the UK, which made it, on paper, it made it more challenging for people to continue to live and work in the UK after their studies. And it's something that we didn't really ever experience, and we've not experienced it since Brexit. Now, that could be down to the quality of the Manchester MBA, the prestige of Alliance Manchester Business School and University of Manchester, how corporate recruiters value a qualification from our institution. That could be one reason. And then when I actually look at the statistics, to say over the last couple of years, around half of our class have stayed in the UK after graduation, and that they've secured roles in the UK. And I'll always say to MBA candidates, there are companies who are looking for the very best MBA graduates, not just at Alliance Manchester Business School, but also at some of the other great schools that we have in the UK. So the opportunities are there, I think, if you are looking at those elite UK schools.
Absolutely. And are you from Manchester, Chris?
I'm actually not originally from Manchester.
I'm really bad with the accent, so I'm sorry if I said you're from Manchester when it's blatantly obvious you're from another part of the UK. Forgive me for that. But I'm just no, Darren. It's a question I'm often asked, actually, in terms of do I come from Manchester? And so originally I come from Wales, but I moved to Manchester when I was 18 to come to university, and I'm 35 now, and so what's that? So the last 17 years, I've lived in Manchester for 15 of the last 17 years. And it very much is my home, but it's a city that's kept me here. And that's more of a testament to the city than anything, because I've seen the city grow so much. It's a big university city. So, it's the second city in the UK after London, especially in terms of business and the impact to the economy. It definitely is. So yeah, it's a great place in the UK to live. Yeah, what do the students, or what do the international students have to say about living in Manchester? Like, do you hear a lot of the same comments year after year? Surprises?
So because of the size of the city and because of the number of, we've got 3 universities in the city, and 2 of them are 2 of the biggest universities in the UK. So a word that you will hear used often is that it's very cosmopolitan, and it is indeed. What we'll also see is, of course, our students love the sport in the city. Most everyone, wherever we go internationally, often you'll hear people talk about the football heritage in the city. Manchester United is always asked about. I will let everyone know that's who I support, but it is also very important to remember that Manchester has 2 huge clubs now in Manchester United and Manchester City. And interestingly enough, in terms of Manchester City, the Manchester City football captain, Vincent Kompany, he studied his global MBA with us, and he graduated in December 2017, actually, on that program. So an interesting fact there for the listeners that they may not know about.
Yeah, I think I saw his video on your website. It was really interesting.
You did? Okay.
Yeah. I was like, wow. So if we can turn to the admissions side of things. So you've explained how your program structure is really unique. what type of students, what types of qualities are you looking for from applicants?
Yeah, so what we're looking for in terms of our applicants, it is the profession. I can't emphasize enough how important professional experience is to us on the Manchester MBA. The average age of students on our program is 29. So they have, on average about 6-7 years of professional experience. And the reason that experience is so key for us is because of the way our program is built. If it was purely a classroom-based experience, then we would potentially look at someone's academic criteria and hold it in higher value than their professional experience because that they would just be in the classroom for 12 months, 15 months, or 18 months. But because we're taking them outside of the classroom so much, we have to be confident about their ability to perform in industry. So, for example, if one of your clients is say Audi, and Audi will say, okay, we want you on a flight to Germany in a couple of days, and we want a status report from the entire group. And this could happen on the commercial business project, which would be the second project that our students would work on. And in that situation, we, as an admissions committee and as a school, we can never be sure how everyone will react in that situation. But you've got to base it on something. And we would base it on, if you've already got quality professional experience and you've already had an impact in your organization or in your industry, they will be transferable skills that will work well on the Manchester MBA, and we will work with you on the Manchester MBA to transform you, and those skills will then further be developed in industry after you graduate. Whereas if we have, say, an applicant who's got 12, 15, 18 months of professional experience, and they may academically be very, very good, their GMAT score might be in the 750s, how will they react in that situation if they don't have that professional experience or haven't been exposed to how business is done in different parts of the world, etc. So that's definitely a key thing that we look for from our MBA applicants.
Yeah, and I found it really interesting how on your admissions page you actually broke down, quite, I'd say, in a granular fashion, what you're looking for. So, of course, academics, you're looking for a certain standard, professional experience, as you just mentioned, and a third category, which you listed as soft skills. And you actually broke this down into being a team player, communication skills, and EQ, or emotional intelligence. Obviously, all skills that are very important when you're doing consulting work and representing Manchester Business School, right, with all your corporate partners. So how can applicants show and give evidence of these qualities in your application process? Because that's a lot to show. Of
course it is. So in terms of our application process, what we really do want to get to know our MBA applicants. Often before our applicants have even applied for the MBA, in terms of my team that I head up, I encourage everyone to take advantage of using the expertise that is in the MBA marketing and recruitment team here at Alliance Manchester Business School. A number of people in the office who have been here for a number of years. And what that means is that these potential MBA applicants can speak to the senior marketing and recruitment officers here to gain insight into the program, what we're looking for, etc. Then when the students apply, we also try to put them in contact with other students or alumni from our program. We then speak to our students and alumni if they've then met those individuals from across the world. Then, providing the application is up to our high standards, we would then invite them for an interview. And this wouldn't be your typical interview of, why you want to do an MBA, etc., because we have introduced into the admissions process video essays, video interviews, now as well. So we can get that information beforehand in the application process. So when we then do invite you for an interview, often it will really be to get to know you as an individual and to see whether you have the right fit for the Manchester MBA. We'll also ask our students during the application process to work on a presentation. And that presentation isn't purely, or it isn't about just your professional experience. It is about what you're doing, what inspires you outside of work, whether it be your family, whether it be the hobbies that you do, whether it be the charity work that you might be involved in. And we really want to, I cannot emphasize enough, to get to know the individual.
What else makes an applicant jump off the page, or when you meet him or her in the interview room, like really get you excited about their candidacy?
Yeah, of course. So you mentioned there about some of the soft skills, about, for example, being a team player. As I've also said earlier on in the podcast, you will work with every single student on the Manchester MBA by the time that you graduate on the program. So we do need to think when we meet MBA applicants, we need to think how can we see them integrating with the class? How can we see them working with their fellow MBA students? I think it's a common misconception, for example, that you have to have a huge GMAT score to get into one of the top schools in the UK or one of the top schools in the world. And of course, something like a GMAT is certainly advantageous. But I always think if you're scoring in the well over 600, say in the 640, 650, 660 range, you should always be making a very competitive MBA application. And then I don't often think that there's much difference between, a 640 compared to a 700 GMAT score. And that's when we go back then to looking at that individual's experience, their professional experience.
Absolutely. So, but in the interview itself, you're not actually having like a case study type of interview or a behavioral interview. Is it more kind of getting to know the candidate, as you said?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
It is much more about getting to know the candidate.
Yes.
In our new admissions process, as I said, we've just this year integrated the video essays, video interviews. So that's where the more formal part of the interview process can happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you also mentioned you value the traits of international exposure and entrepreneurial experience. Can you talk a bit more about those two traits? Yeah,
so we if you're considering enrolling on an MBA program, and if you're looking at, say, studying at a business school in UK, or actually not just the UK, in Europe, what you'll find is that the curriculums of the leading schools in Europe is very, very globally focused in comparison to, say, our colleagues in the US. So if you think about the schools in the US, you will have, the US, biggest economy in the world, and the majority of the students who enroll on MBA programs in the US, about 70% of them and above will be US nationals or will be coming from the US. So it makes sense that the curriculums, generally speaking, at US schools is very focused on the US. Whereas in Europe, you won't find an Italian school just focusing on Italy or a UK school just focusing on UK. It will be much more globally focused. And that's also reflected in the student body.
Yes.
You mentioned our class size, between 100 and 120 students. The current class who started with us a couple of weeks ago, there was 114 students in that class, and you had 30 nationalities there, of which about 22% of that class were from the UK. And that 22% is a staggeringly high figure in terms of UK students, actually, in comparison to the US. because generally speaking, UK numbers at UK schools can be, often be in one-digit figures, your 6, 7, 8, 9%. But even with, such a strong UK presence in our MBA program this year, we still have to have students from around the world entering our program. It's fascinating putting students into a classroom and finding out, how they integrate with each other in terms of how business is done in the UK, how that differs to how business is done in Africa, how business in East Africa differs from how business is done in West Africa. And all these issues are explored in the MBA and with the fellow students and with the academics.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're learning so much from each other too during those consultancy projects in terms of work style and culture. But yeah, just to end this section do you have any other tips on how applicants can improve their chances of admissions?
I think the biggest tip I would like to leave with the listeners is to reach out to my team and to speak with them and to find out if they're the right fit for us, if we're the right fit for them, and to speak to the team, and also to speak with our students and alumni.
Absolutely. Okay. And to make this even more, and to highlight this even more, that's even before they apply. You guys are more than willing to talk to applicants.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In terms of scholarships, could you tell us more about the scholarship process and kind of, roughly how many, what percentage of your class wins scholarships?
Yeah. So we have scholarships for international students that range from 10% to 50% of the course fees. Around a third of our students are fortunate enough to be awarded scholarships. The scholarships are always based on merit. So that's looking at the application holistically, the academic background, the GMAT score, the professional, their interviews, and we are fortunate to have these scholarships. And because we're looking for, as I've said a couple of times, we are looking for the best MBA applicants in the world. So if the listeners are thinking that they meet that criteria, then they should be aspiring and working towards hopefully achieving a scholarship.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, for a lot of applicants, they can't change their college GPA. They can't change what they did 5 years ago or 4 years ago or 3 years ago, but maybe they can bump up their GMAT score. Do you think it's worth it for them to try to get a much better GMAT score, say, 40, 50 points more to increase their scholarship chances? Or do you think it's not worth it?
So, I mentioned there how at Manchester we don't take the GMAT as the be all and end all, and that's correct. We do have some students, for example, who will have scored something like a 580 or a 590, which isn't what is traditionally classed as a good score, and they will have been offered places on the Manchester MBA based on other factors. Their professional experience will have held a lot of weight there. And then equally, we'll have people who have applied to us with scores of 680, 690, who have not been offered places for the sole reason that we didn't think that they had the quality of their professional experience was to the standard that we would expect from one of our MBA students. So I would always say it depends on what your original score is. You need over 600 as a minimum to be considered for a scholarship. But then if you score 630, is a 680, 670 going to make much of a difference? I'd say not always. So, again, I go back to your previous question there in terms of, getting in touch with us. So and that's something we would be able to help on an individual basis and give more of an individual answer, because we would look at that person's CV and resume, and we would base it and say, well, with your level of experience, actually a 630 is gonna work out very well for you. If we felt someone's professional experience wasn't as stellar as we might like, but we could certainly see the potential in that individual, then we would say, do you know what, actually maybe bumping it up by 40 to 50 points could help you further down in the application process.
Well, that's a great service you guys provide, and I'll be sure to put a link in our show notes to get in touch with you guys. Or, if you're listening, just go straight to the Manchester MBA website and get in touch with their team. I mean, I wish more schools did this. From a career perspective, Chris, could you help us understand what makes the Manchester MBA unique?
Yeah, so what makes Manchester MBA unique from a careers perspective? Well, I think we've got the most amazing postgraduate career support team, for one. But no, I said that sort of in jest, but to back that up and to maybe quantify it a bit, in terms of our postgraduate careers service on the MBA program, students on the Manchester MBA, they get unlimited one-to-one support with our careers team throughout the MBA. And I don't think that is traditionally offered at business schools around the world. And as with all of the schools, or as I expect with the majority of schools, we will also have career specialists or careers advisors in specialist industries. So you might be working with one individual in terms of you want to be focusing on the consultancy sector, but you might also be working with someone else in the team because you're also interested in the energy sector or the tech sector, for example. So having that unlimited support, I think, is something that I'd hold a lot of value on that. And I know for a fact that our MBA student or our MBA graduates really valued that support during their program. And to take things maybe a little bit outside of Manchester there in terms of what's unique, we've also got a global reach, and that is translated from what we do in terms of student recruitment, in terms of what myself and my team do in the admission stage, to the global curriculum, but also in terms of the journeys that other students will undertake after they graduate from the MBA. Because not all our students will stay in the UK after graduation. What we're seeing in the industry at the moment is you are seeing more people apply for MBA programs who are more globally focused, because they also want to be considered global professionals and they want global experience around the world. And because we've got our campuses in Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai and Sao Paulo, it means our careers teams have got contacts in those areas. And, it's not just those areas, but that is something that is very unique.
No, absolutely. And so I noticed in the last graduating class, it looked like your top industries were consulting, finance, and technology. Do you see that continuing in the next, say 5 years, or have you guys seen any trends in terms of your placements of your MBA students?
Yeah, so in terms of trends there, so going back now to when I started in the industry.
Oh yes, let's hear this.
So by far the two biggest sectors will have been finance, banking, and consultancy sectors. That's where they were by far the two most popular sectors for MBA students to go into after graduation. And then the third one would be technically classed and the rest, which encompasses all other sectors. That's changed in recent years because you still have finance, banking, and consultancy, but the tech sector has very much entered the fold there. So you have the likes of Amazon, Google, Microsoft now, who have very large, structured MBA hiring programs across the world, including the UK. But we also at Manchester, we've never wanted to be regarded as a specialist school if you want to get into one particular sector. So, take this year, the tech sector is our number one post-graduation sector to enter to. But then actually last year, it was the fifth most popular sector. But we actually take pride in that, because what we want to do at Manchester is we want to put a number of different options in front of our students.
No, absolutely. And so again, would it be possible for you to just quickly walk us through what the typical visa process is for a graduate from Manchester who's not from the UK? Do they need to apply for a work visa before they graduate, or do they need to get a job first? How does that work?
So you would need to secure a job before your student visa runs out. And again, this is something across the UK. The type of companies who are hiring MBAs from the top schools in the UK, a good example would be, say, Amazon, who have roles across the UK for MBA students. Once they've decided that you're the individual that they want and that they want to offer the job to, they have the infrastructure working alongside the top schools in the UK to ensure that the visa process runs through very smoothly. So that's never an issue once you've been offered a role.
Got it. And okay, great. And if we can step back, we've covered admissions, the program, financing, careers. How would you best describe the student culture? Or maybe if you could capture it in a word or two, no pressure. Right? Not to put you on the spot, but how would you describe the student culture? Because I think that's a big thing that a lot of our applicants ask about. They're not always able to visit schools, and they can look it through a website and brochure, but to really understand the culture, of course, they should talk to as many students as they can. But what would you say is kind of defines the Alliance, Manchester Business School culture, an MBA program?
Yeah, so you definitely did put me on the spot there, but I think I've got in answer to your question with the two words. I would say it's working collaboratively.
I love that. And is there anything else about the program that you would like our listeners to know before we sign off?
Anything else for the listeners to know about? One of the things that we're really looking forward to now, and our current class who started with us 2 weeks are looking forward to. We are in the process of finalising our new Alliance Manchester Business School building. So that's an £85 million investment has gone into that school, into our new building, and that will be opening at the end of the year. And our full-time MBA class who've just started, they will then in the new year be moving in to the new school. And then the students who will be starting with us this time next year, of course, they'll be starting from day one at the new business school. So that's something all the students, all the staff, everyone is very, very excited about at the moment.
That's amazing. Well, thank you, Chris, so much for your time and insights into the program. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to hearing from any of your listeners if they want to get in touch. As you said, by all means they can. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your number one school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.